Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Relieve Regret. I'm Shadow Ball here with you today with my co-host.
Hi, everybody. Victoria here.
Excellent. Victoria, I'm so happy to see you. It's been a little while.
It has been a while.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's sunny out today.
hmm Yeah, sunny Friday. Very, very needed.
It's been a long, dark winter.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know if I
Didn't that
said this the last time we recorded, but there was a news story that came out that said Ontario, Canada, everyone, which is where I live, we just experienced the darkest winter we've had in 72 years.
I believe it. It was rough. And
Yeah.
coming out of, usually I don't mind the spring time change. In fact, I usually love it. And this time around, no, I was like one of those same people who were like, oh, I hate the time change. I'm so all over the place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was.
Me too. I felt like I had jet lag, and I've never experienced that before. And I think it's
Mhm.
because the winter was so dark and there was such a lack of sunlight that our
Maybe.
bodies are just whacked.
hmm Well, and
That's
just
why I
like the
like it.
general, like being inside all the time and
Yeah.
reducing our social calendars and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely an interesting time to be living through, but we're living and it's actually pretty great. Do you have a cause for applause this episode?
Yeah, I'm gonna call the sun my cause for applause today,
Oh,
honestly. I
amazing.
am like went for this beautiful walk today. I wore my winter jacket and I was debating, do I wear my winter jacket? Do I not wear my winter jacket? And I was hot. I should have
Right.
worn my spring jacket. So that makes me
hmm
really happy. And the water was calm and beautiful. And my husband was home from work today. Christian was home, so I got to go for a walk with him. So that's my
hmm
cause for applause, celebrating the small things, celebrating my walk today. What about you?
Oh, nice. I'm gonna go with something sun related because it's gonna just be a weird connection. Um, but one of my favorite artists is named Hosier, and he came out
Mm-hmm.
with new music last week, and his concert tickets went on sale today. I don't know if I'll be able to afford a ticket, but at the same time, I'm still gonna haunt the website after we're done recording. Um, and he has a song called Sunlight that's very like uplifting and wonderful and
Oh, I'm gonna
good to
listen to
listen to
it.
in the winter. He has lots of great songs, but Sunlight is definitely one of the ones that will pull me out of a funk. And yeah, so sunlight is our cause for applause today. I love
Yay!
it. So I think today's gonna, we've had some long episodes, listeners, and we really appreciate you listening to them and giving us your feedback. I think today is going to be a little bit shorter, but then I think that a lot. And then they end up becoming longer anyways because we end up talking them out a lot. But that's cool, and I always like your feedback on things. So
That's why we're here, everyone, to put our own
yeah,
stuff out to the world
exactly.
so that people feel like they can be vulnerable to put their own stuff out to the world too. Because if we can do it on
hmm
a podcast, you can do it with friends, you can do it with
Yeah.
strangers, and you can discover that being vulnerable about something, accepting feedback, telling your stories, um, it can be really healing and can help you become more self aware and have a greater connection to yourself and to the world.
hmm
That's why we're here. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually saw another tweet too that was like, does anyone know of something that's like not therapy, but like a place where like I could talk and then my friend could talk and then we could just like talk back and forth? And other people were like, a conversation?
I'm like, what do you
And
mean?
then
Go
other
out for a
people were
cup of
like,
coffee?
yeah.
What are you talking about?
And then other people were like, no, like a structured way where like one person gets a set amount of time and then the other person gets a set amount of time. And I was like, oh, we're actually kind of doing that with
That
this
is
podcast. So that's
so
kind of cool.
interesting. And you should have commented because I feel like that's exactly what we're trying to demonstrate here is
hmm
you
Yeah.
get to talk. I'm not going to say anything. Afterwards, I'm going to ask you if you want feedback or if you just wanted to be heard. And then I'm going to respect
hmm
whatever your answer to that question is. And then I get to talk
hmm
and you're going to ask me if I want feedback or if I just wanted to be heard. And
hmm
um, that's so interesting. Is this like a post COVID thing where we've forgotten how to have conversations or So interesting. But I also
Hmm.
think the skills that
Yeah.
I mean, I learned this as a skill. It's like reflective listening is what it's called. I learned this as a skill,
Hmm.
but it's now habit for me. I don't think, oh, I'm going to do the reflective listening in this conversation. I just do it in most of my
Right.
conversations now. But to
Hmm.
learn it and make it a habit actually makes people feel heard, people
Hmm.
feel valued, what they said is valuable, and it helps conversations flow easier too, I think. And I hope that that's what you and I are demonstrating. So it's so interesting that you saw a tweet
Yeah.
asking that question.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very much a lurker on Twitter. I don't tweet. I don't respond to other people's tweets. I just read the most ridiculous things I can find, and then I bring them up to my husband later in the day. I'll be like, "I saw this ridiculous thing." And sometimes he'll have seen it too, so then we have like our opinions about it.
I don't even have Twitter, so I don't know.
You
No.
shouldn't. It's such a time suck, and especially like with who's running it now, it's the product has gotten worse under new leadership. But it's also just like, again, not that car crashes are enjoyable because someone's getting hurt, but it's like watching a car crash in real time. And in that way, it's fascinating
Interesting.
as like a cultural like time.
I'm definitely have not been really great on social media for years and years and years now. I'm like, I
Mm,
have my Facebook group that I
yeah.
run, the Worry Free and Joyful Living Facebook group. We always put the link in the podcast notes for that, everyone, if you want to join. But that's really where I put my focus
Hmm.
because it's community. I go in there,
Yeah.
Shadow's in there with me too. I talk, I do a Facebook Live every Monday. And then that it's like a because it's a group, it's not like posting aimlessly or whatever. It really is a kind of a
Hmm.
community, and that's I don't know. It's really all I'm interested in, I guess.
Oh,
Like,
and it's a great group. Like I find that there's a lot of really positive people in that group, and not like that toxic positive, but just like genuinely want the best for each other. And
I think that's what people are looking for is connection. I don't know.
hmm.
I know like from a business point of view, I should be much better on social media, but I'm not into it.
Right. And wouldn't that
Like,
be counterintuitive to your very like mission in life to help people worry less? Like if you're out there worrying about your social media constantly, like that's not living a very
yeah, I
present
think that's kind of
life.
why I stopped doing it because I found myself becoming
Mhm.
obsessive. Like, I have to get my Instagram post up. I have to do 2 posts a day. I have to get like X amount of
Yeah.
followers. And then I'm like, oh, I don't have enough followers yet. I only got 10 new followers today. I didn't get 12 new followers today. And my
Mm-hmm.
goal is 12 a day. And then like just becoming obsessed with this thing that's like, but are these followers commenting on my post? Do we actually have connection? Is there actually community there? Whereas I find
Mm-hmm.
in the Facebook group, and I might be making myself sound old here because I know all the young people are like, Facebook is for old people. But like
Right.
the Facebook group has potential for community and there is community there, right? Someone puts a post up and people do comment on it or puts a question up and
Mm-hmm.
people answer the question versus yeah, I focused a lot on Instagram a few years ago and got a lot of followers, but they
Mm-hmm.
weren't interacting. So were they
Right.
real? Were they bots? What were they?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Or they could be like me,
they're
they're just lurking. They're just
lurking.
looking for something to scroll through when they're taking a
Yeah.
break, right? Like you kind of, you're not there to like interact. You are just there to
And
read
I
and
guess that's
like look
okay
at
too.
stuff.
Like, of course, that's fine if you're treating it like an online magazine or information or beautiful
Hmm.
pictures or whatever. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I just haven't been motivated on social media. I guess that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and the things change so fast too. And then like I feel like just as I learn one tool, it's like, well, that tool's garbage. Here's the
yeah, I
best new
can't
tool
keep
you can
up.
use.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of why
But
I like doing a podcast better. I'd rather focus on the
right.
podcast than focus on social media, really. I mean, we
Yeah,
do have social media
that's
for the
true.
podcast, everybody, and that's where you can communicate with us. But I'm not
Oh,
going, we need
absolutely.
1 million followers on our social media, and how are we going to do
No.
that, right? I'd rather put that
Yeah.
energy into making a really great podcast.
Yeah, and I think we're doing that. We each have a regret to share today, like always. Do you want to go first today, or do you want me to go
I want you to go
first?
first. Okay.
Okay, well, then let's get started. I have an experience I need to let go of in order to move forward. I regret losing my temper. Over the past 5 years, one of my main goals has been to be nicer to others. I'm proud of how much progress I have made, but now, every time I think about the times that I had unleashed my temper on someone, I feel absolutely sick to my stomach. I also used to really admire people that had this like sharp tongue, who could like really like lay down the law. And now I just simply pity those people when I see them trying to use their rage to get their own way. Now, an interesting consequence of holding on to this regret, though, is that I've kind of lost touch with the good side of having a temper. I feel like before I was able to stand up for myself and others whenever danger was present. It also came in handy when I needed to get a lot of work done in a short amount of time. So if I had really delayed cleaning my apartment for some, like, for any number of reasons, but someone was coming to stay the weekend, I knew I could like get myself angry enough to like just clean the apartment in a rage style. And like, sure, it wasn't the healthiest thing, but it would get done. It was this like inner fire that kept me productive, this reserve of electricity that I can't really seem to count on anymore. I keep thinking it will come back if I really needed it, but there's been a few situations now that show me I'm so embarrassed of losing my temper completely that I don't really have one at all anymore. So I will say, I did everything I could in those moments when I lost my temper with the tools I had at the time, and that's okay. That is who I was then, and I have grown in so many ways. I am hopeful and relieved because I can learn new coping mechanisms even if it's at a glacial pace. I'm worthy of channeling my temper into something useful like a piece of art or an intense workout, but I should make sure there are other safeguards in place before I take that on.
Do you want feedback or do you just want to be heard?
Oh, absolutely.
I think this is huge because I think a lot of regret or guilt that many of us feel is after a temper tantrum, right?
Hmm.
So I can't remember what episode it was in season one. We talked about discharging versus letting go.
Total. I was thinking about that episode too.
And
Yeah.
discharging, for those of you who haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen. But discharging is when we basically have a temper tantrum. It's when we're suppressing emotions, we're avoiding them, we're holding them down, and we don't control when they come out. So we might yell at the
Hmm.
cashier at the grocery store or yell at a family member or a friend over nothing. Like, I wanted that piece of
Hmm.
bread and you took that piece of bread, or, just over like really silly,
Hmm.
petty things.
Yeah.
And discharging can also come out like physically, like you feel out of balance in your body and you walk into the coffee
Hmm.
table or whatever.
Yeah. And then you swear for 10 minutes.
Right? You're like,
Yeah.
why did I do that? And you swear
Yeah.
at yourself, and it makes other people around you
Hmm.
uncomfortable because you're having a temper tantrum on
Hmm.
yourself. Right?
Yeah.
And like it just makes other people uncomfortable, even though you're not yelling at them, you're yelling at yourself. It's still like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a really good
Hmm.
point too, Shadoe. So
Yeah.
you were feeling like you unleashed your, were you feeling like you were discharging a lot? Like when you were doing that temper, it was like discharging, and it
Yeah.
was like you weren't controlling it, and it wasn't in like the opportune moments. It wasn't moments where you're standing up for yourself, but it was moments where it would just come out.
I think so. I think sometimes I do feel like there's been times where I stood up for myself where I wasn't out of line. Like it was just like, no, this needed to be said. But there are times where like, yeah, I just would let things bubble up and like bubble over. And I used to kind of like, and this was definitely before COVID, but I would like ask my husband to like go for a walk or like get out of the house so that I could rage clean. Because like again, talk about like not wanting other people to be uncomfortable. Like I didn't want him to see me like swearing and like scrubbing and like doing all those things, but at the same time I knew that that got results. So like I would let anger build up to a point and then be like, okay, You get out of here. Let me be by myself. I'm gonna like werewolf on this apartment.
What was okay? So I have two questions. Um,
Yeah.
the rage cleaning thing, like I've never experienced that myself. So, um, are you angry at yourself and then you're taking it out in cleaning? And then the other thing, is there a connection to ADHD with rage, this idea of rage cleaning? And can you
Yes. Yeah.
explain
Rage
it?
cleaning is definitely related to ADHD. It's also related to just like some trauma I have around cleaning in general. So sometimes like I just like it has taken a lot of concerted effort to kind of keep things at a standard cleanliness, if you will. It's not something that it takes like a big part of my brain up. I don't think about it, and then when I don't think about it, the structure falls away, and then like the whole house is messy. But I also had anxiety at the time where like if someone was coming over, I'd be way too embarrassed to have them come up visit me in a messy house. So like the anxiety would override the ADHD, and then that's when it would get all done.
So
And
did
like it's like a Tasmanian devil effect. I'm using all these different animals, but like like I would be like in one room, like collect half the dishes, go to another room, make the bed, go to another room, grab some laundry. The dishwasher's still open, still half emptied, not fully emptied, and like I'd have really loud music on, and like yeah, I was like just a Tasmanian devil, like spinning like all over the place trying to get it all done. And then by the time someone showed up, I was too tired to actually spend time with them. Um, you know, and like that's not a safe place for my husband to be around. Like that's not nice. But again, it got the results. It got the like like the house would be clean and it would be done.
to the
So,
detriment of your own
um,
mental and emotional health, though.
who cares? And I mean, I care
Okay.
now, right? Like I do care now. But I do like I at this point, it's funny when I started writing this regret, I almost was going to make it all just about like the fact that I've lost my temper. And then I was like, oh, it's funny how like losing your temper has two meanings.
Oh
Because
yeah,
like there's like
double
right,
entendre.
like
Yeah,
there's just
yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah, and I just never even thought of that before because like the example I'm thinking of is like I was somewhere where I was around an unsafe person and one of my friends had to be the person to stand up to them. And I was really embarrassed that I wasn't able to like conjure up the anger to tell that person to just get the F out of here. But like that's what that person needed to hear. He was making us feel unsafe. And usually that's my role. And it was so weird to not have that role of like telling that person to move the F on. And in that way, I was like, oh man, have I lost my temper? Like,
So here's my other curious question that I wrote down while you were
yeah.
talking was the idea of temper, like naming it temper
Hmm.
and like
Hmm.
be a good girl, be quiet, sit in the corner, like the way that
Sure.
many women are raised.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you use your voice, if you use it with any kind of angry tone, you get labeled
Hmm.
and stigmatized. And then there's like this guilt within us. So like, I don't want to be seen as that way. I don't want to be called a bitch. I don't want to be called an angry woman,
Hmm.
blah, like all of that, right?
Yeah.
So is there another in this like getting rid of using your temper or having temper tantrums, as you called them?
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying like, but you've also like lost the ability to kind of like stand up for yourself with anger. Is it because you're afraid of being
Yeah.
labeled? Or is it because you don't want to feel the guilt, so you have this guilty or embarrassment or sick to your
Mm.
stomach feeling, regardless if it's like a rage Tasmanian devil temper versus a temper that is
Hmm.
totally justified because you're standing up for yourself? Are you seeing them
Hmm.
both as the same thing? So you've just let go of all of it.
I think so. I think like because it's a range as opposed to like it's not two different things
Mm-hmm.
to me. It's like if I let myself be a little bit angry, I'm going to go off the deep end so fast. And it's not like a, oh, be a good girl and all that kind of stuff. Because of course I have some of that in there too. But also like I have and I know I have taken up all the space in rooms. I have like a lot of the things that we kind of criticize men for, I've been that person. I have been the person who like takes over the emotion and like makes it all about me. Or like one time I was in a mediation at work and we were talking about a problem that we were all trying to fix. And like I basically was just like, well, if everyone listened to me, we wouldn't have this problem. And like started getting mad and like all this other stuff. So, but again, like that's not healthy. That's not a good response to conflict.
So can I ask, so my other curious question here is the feeling of regret, which is what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
You have this like really
Mhm.
strong feeling of regret or guilt about taking up space, temper,
Yeah.
sucking the energy out of the room, whatever you want to call it. But there are actually
Mhm.
appropriate times to do that where it's okay to take up the space with your voice. For example, standing up for
Mhm.
yourself. And it can be really empowering. So, where is
Mhm.
the line, or I encourage you to find the line, because I think this might be a rhetorical question, but in letting go of
Mhm.
all of it, right? You're letting go of
Mhm.
the ability to empower yourself too in the moments where it is
Right.
right and it is okay to be angry if someone's,
Mhm.
you need to stand up for yourself and someone's not treating you well. And so
Mhm.
that's interesting to explore, and it's also I think really valuable for the point of this podcast and our conversation is that
Mhm.
we're practicing releasing those feelings of regret, worry,
Mhm.
guilt, shame, possibly even grief in some states. Like that's what situations, that's what we're
Right.
talking about here, because it can prevent us from moving forward. But this is almost
Mhm.
like the other side of the coin. Well, no, it still is preventing you from moving forward in some ways, like
Yeah.
letting go of the anger so that you don't feel that
Mhm.
embarrassment, shame, all of those feelings. But then you
Mhm.
need to hold on to some of it or relabel it as something else. Don't
Yeah,
call
I
it
think
being a
yeah.
temper tantrum and being angry. Say I'm like
Yeah.
standing up for myself with a strong voice is not having a temper tantrum.
Mhm.
I don't know what the other name for it would be, but can you separate
No,
them?
I
You know?
yeah, and I think like it's funny because like most of our podcast episodes so far have been about a specific story. And like this one isn't a specific story. It's just in general how like I feel about like getting angry. I feel
Mm,
regretful about it. And then I also am feeling regret about not being angry. And
yeah.
it's like, well, then how do I move forward? Because clearly I'm stuck here. Like clearly there's some thorny bushes all around me that I can't quite seem
So I'm
to
wondering if like there's
navigate.
regret about being angry where you were like, oh, I probably should have done that. I discharged on someone.
Hmm.
Versus, so that's like a regret after the fact almost.
Yeah.
Versus, and that's like a regret where you actually think about it after the fact, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You're analyzing your actions versus almost like a pre-programmed feeling of regret or embarrassment that's like instinctual or animalistic. When you stand up for yourself, you almost
Hmm.
have like, and I experienced this too with my anxiety. When I stand up for myself, even though rationally in my brain I'm like, yep, that's good. I was totally justified to be angry about that. Totally justified to stand up for myself. I didn't hurt anybody in the process. I stood up for myself and I told that guy
Hmm.
he was being an asshole and he can't treat me that way or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But then I still
Hmm.
have anxiety and regret after because it's programming in me and it's like the physical response versus
Right.
feeling regret because you're actually going through a thought process and being like, yeah, I should feel guilty about that. I'm going to learn from that. I shouldn't have done that.
Hmm.
I'm going to try not to do that in the future versus the physical response. Does that make sense? It's like two different
Yeah.
responses. And how do you get rid of that physical response of like, I stood up for myself and I still feel anxiety and regret and shame, but this is just a physical response that I'm
Hmm.
having or a pre programmed response. I'm going to talk myself out of it that, like, yeah, I should have stood up for myself and I'm going to continue to stand up for
Right.
myself in the future when I need to. And I'm going to try my very best
Hmm.
not to feel guilty about it. Or if I do feel guilty about it, I'm going to talk to myself and I'm going to say, this is not something I should feel guilty about.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't, does that make sense? Like what I'm saying, does that make
It
sense? Like it's
does,
two different
yeah.
kinds
Like
of regret?
the physical sensation, the physical sensation is just the adrenaline jump, right? Like there's such an adrenaline from it, and like of course after the adrenaline you feel kind of crappy about it. Um, what was sticking out for me was the idea of like not hurting somebody. But there, and it's not that anyone ever deserves to be hurt, but that includes
Yeah.
myself. So if I feel like I'm being hurt in some way, I can tell that person, maybe not even in the nicest way, that
Yep.
they're hurting me, because clearly for that person, niceness doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Sometimes you need to be, I love what you just said. Sometimes you need
Yeah.
to be assertive. And being assertive doesn't mean
Hmm.
that you're being mean. It means you're being
Yeah.
assertive and saying, no, no, no. Have you ever heard the
Hmm.
saying, like, I think it kind of goes in here, you don't get to tell me that you didn't hurt me? Like if
Right.
I'm saying
Yeah.
to you, no, stop and standing up for myself,
Hmm.
I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to say,
Right.
yeah, no, your words are hurting me or your actions are hurting me and I don't like it. That doesn't make
Hmm.
me a mean person.
Yeah. True.
But it's, I want to, like, I sincerely want to thank you for this because I think we all feel this way. Like the guilt
Mm.
cycle of the like I discharged or I got angry, and then we all go to this thought of like, oh, that I'm a mean person, I'm a bad person, I was really mean when I did that, I should, and then it
Hmm.
is actually two totally different things. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and being assertive, and sometimes you have to. Sometimes people's feelings get hurt, but the reason their feelings get hurt is because you're disrupting a thought pattern in that person. So their ego immediately makes
Hmm.
them feel hurt. I'm right, you're wrong. But guess what you're also
Hmm.
doing? You're giving them the opportunity for change to disrupt that pattern.
Right.
So when we
Right.
stand up for ourselves, we're making the world a better place or we're making our relationships a better relationships, and sometimes it has to be uncomfortable for that to happen versus
Hmm.
just raging out on someone and saying mean things. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
totally different thing and we shouldn't try to do that. That's discharging.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Not everybody's gonna like. I had a friend once that said, I know that not everybody likes me, but they respect me.
Right.
And I was like, wow. Because sometimes she could push people the wrong way. She was a very assertive person,
Hmm.
but she was confident in being assertive because she was like, people might not
Right.
like me. They might not like the way I approach things when I'm assertive and I stand up for what I believe in, but I do know that they respect me. They respect
Right.
what I'm
Right.
saying, they respect the words I'm saying. And so
Hmm.
that was actually really helpful for me as a person that I would say I'm a recovering pushover, everybody. Like,
That's
right? Because
funny.
I've this is definitely part of my journey in the past like 10 years is like, well, if you knew me 10 years ago, man, I was such a pushover. I felt this guilt all the time. People aren't going to like
Right.
me. I just would say yes to things, but then it just built up inside of me, right? Because I was like, oh,
Hmm.
why did I say yes to that? But I'd be angry at that other person and angry at myself and whatever, all those things, right? But it was helpful for me. Like, it's okay, not everybody's going to like me, but they're going to listen to what I have to say and it might make change. And they're probably going to respect that. They might disagree with my opinion, but I know that they respect my opinion. And that's,
Hmm.
I think it's pretty true.
Yeah, I've definitely known women like that, and I always like I respect them and
Mm-hmm.
admire them for that. But it's still something I struggle with, and I think it's just related to like there's already so many things about not being liked that like I don't
Mm-hmm.
control, and it feels like this is one of those things I can. So I think that might be part of it too. But I think that gets into another regret, and I think we've spent quite a lot of time on me. Do you have any final thoughts about this regret in general, or yeah,
What you just said, this is something that I can control as long as it's not to the
mm-hmm.
detriment of yourself.
True, true.
So every situation's different, but be aware and choose what you're controlling as long as it's not to the detriment of yourself. Because You're allowed to stand up for yourself. You're allowed to show
Oh,
anger. Anger
yeah.
is a normal human emotion.
Hmm.
So just as long as it's not feeding some kind of low self-esteem when you are trying to control not being anger or ragey. That's
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good thing to think about. What I meant there was is not necessarily that I do worry about that. I was just trying to like think about why is it that I see a woman do that. I'm like, wow, cool. But then when I think about doing it for myself, I'm like, ooh. But I think
Right.
that's just
Yeah.
a that's why I'm thinking that's just like a whole I think I might even just write this down as like a whole other regret about like why can't I mirror what I admire in
Mm.
others? Hmm.
Yeah. I think we all feel that way. You know, when you're watching a movie and a
Hmm.
woman stands up for something, you're like, man, I wish I could do that in the moment. Right? But
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
skill.
yeah.
It's a skill that we learn. And I don't think there's a black and white answer here or anything, but I think you've just opened a door to for anybody listening too is to know that
Mm,
there are ways you can navigate these things and become more self-aware in the moment or checking in or doing feedback after the moment to create the patterns that are the two different patterns, standing up for yourself versus preventing
hmm.
discharging, and changing
Hmm.
like that
Hmm.
thought pattern in your brain that like any kind of standing up for yourself equals discharging. It doesn't. So just being
Hmm.
aware and navigating it. And like this is the first step. If
Right.
you're listening to this podcast, first step, just next time it happens, stop and think about it after. And then say to
Right.
yourself, no, actually, that was justified. Or,
Hmm.
okay, what can I learn from that? Right?
Right.
Yeah, it's just it's an activity in
Interesting.
self awareness.
Hmm.
So thank you for that because I'm pretty
Amazing.
sure 100% of our listeners feel regret about anger.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. Um, Great. Do you have a regret about anger or otherwise to share today?
Yeah, so mine is interesting.
Always
Always
is.
is. Okay, so I have something that I want to let go of in order to move forward. Kind of relates to anger. I think I've been angry at myself for putting myself in this position. So it's like an anger at myself. But I was the victim of a con artist. I was a victim of fraud. Uh, I think maybe like 10 years ago, I've told this story before on the podcast. I worked for a 9 to 5 job and I had a total burnout and I had to leave that job and I didn't leave it on the best set of circumstances. There was a lot of anger there and I burned a lot of bridges and I was also very vulnerable and developed anxiety. I didn't know what was going on with me. My brain was just an anxious brain all the time. And I believe that I got targeted at that point. I believe that I got targeted at that point because this person thought that I was gonna come into a lot of money because I was, in a court case with my former employer. So what happened was I met this person through a friend of a friend kind of thing, and she wanted to start a business with me, a wellness business. And, it was like a slow, like she was slowly, what's it called? Grooming me into it. She hired me as a trainer for a bit and then we became friends. And then she told me that she had her MBA in business and sales and marketing. She told me all these backstories. She said that she had her yoga teacher certification, a lot of things. And again, I think she targeted me because I was really vulnerable. I was looking for someone to lead me because I was just at such a weak state mentally coming out of the overwhelm, burnout. I was healing, and it took me 5-6 years to heal from my overwhelm and burnout. And this was right after it happened, like right after I'd left my job. And so we started a wellness business, and things started going weird. Things started going weird. At the same time, she had another business going on with a contractor who she said that she was a designer. And I'm like, wow, how does this person have her MBA? She also is a designer for interior design. She has her yoga certification. Let me tell you something. To get your yoga instructor certification, everyone, you have to do like 100 hours of teaching and mentorship to get yoga certifications. And so she starts working as the head designer for this construction company that renovates houses too. And things started going weird. I started being gaslighted. I remember when it really kind of came to a T. Her and I went out. We were having a lunch meeting at a restaurant, and I was having anxiety. I just like my spidey senses were going off. I was having anxiety. I was 5 minutes late for the meeting, which isn't not normal for me to be late for something, especially at that time in my life. You're just frantic all the time when you're going through a burnout and anxiety. You're just really frantic all the time. And we're sitting in this restaurant and she starts telling me all these things, accusing me of all these things that I've done. And I'm like, what is happening? I didn't do any of these things. And I left that meeting believing that I had. And I went home and I talked to Christian. I was like, so this just happened. And now I'm questioning if I actually did these things. He's like, no, you didn't do those things. She's gaslighting you. And then other people around me started saying, this person's fishy. We had a mutual friend that she was renovating her house with her other business and had totally kind of conned this person too. And anyways, long story short, I started noticing she was taking money out of our tax account because I could see the bank records. And she's like, well, you took money out, so I should be able to take money out. Those sorts of things. And gaslighting. I'm like, but that's not how business works. And then I'm like, I'm so confused because I thought you were going to handle the business stuff because you have an MBA and all these. Anyways, long story short, the construction business / renovating business, a bunch of victims, I'm going to call them victims, came together and found each other. And turns out they had just been charging them thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, and not providing services. It was almost like a Ponzi scheme within this construction company. They had bought a house in Costa Rica, so it became a money laundering thing. And I pulled out of the business. And I mean, our business was not at a place where it was making money at all, our wellness business. I mean, it only was going on for like a year or 2 years. It was still kind of just trying to figure it out, right? When you start any small business, everyone, you're not going to make money for the first 3 years, to be honest. And I pulled out because we just kept butting heads. She kept trying to gaslight me. We're fighting all the time. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. We're fighting all the time. And it was right after I pulled out that I get a call from a detective saying, can you talk to me about this person? I'm like, absolutely, I can talk to you about this person. He's like, you're not in any trouble. But he already had the bank records from our company. He already had them. He's like, and we went through them line by line. And he's like, this type of person, this happens all the time. He's like, it's not your fault. They find you when you're vulnerable. And I told him what was going on in my life. He was a fantastic detective. And he was just like, you're going to feel a lot of guilt about this, but you've done nothing wrong. Like, this is what these people do. They take advantage of you. They find you in a vulnerable place. They groom you. And I mean, I didn't really lose anything. Like, I'm not a victim as much as all of the people that were doing under this renovation business she was doing. But the wellness business, I'm a victim of her sucking my time. And I'm a victim of being put in an abusive relationship again, where all of a sudden I was being gaslighted. And thank God I pulled out of the business before the business really did start making money. But there's a lot of shame here, right? Like there's a lot of shame here. And the consequences of holding on to that shame is I must be bad at business. I have this belief that I'm bad at business now. I have this belief that I don't make smart business decisions, or that I trust people too much and I can easily get scammed, and therefore my business won't grow. And therefore I don't deserve to make money, and I don't deserve to live a comfortable life where I'm making money, and I can't help people if I'm not a good decision maker myself, right? But I did everything that I could. I realize now that I did everything I could in that moment because I was incredibly vulnerable. I was suffering big time from anxiety. My brain was not functioning properly. I was constantly in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. My brain was chemically off. My sense of overwhelm was off. And I was just desperate to find something that I could control. And I thought having this business with this person, and I didn't think I could do a business by myself. I thought I needed a partner. I was emotionally vulnerable at the time, and she took advantage of that. And that's who I was then. And I've grown since then, and I can look back at it now. But this is my first time really talking publicly about it. Like my friends and family know that this happened, but I didn't talk publicly at our court case about it. The detective didn't need my testimony or anything because how I got scammed by her was basically an emotional scam. It didn't get to a point of like money fraud because I pulled out in time. But yeah, if I think I'm a pretty smart person. I think I'm pretty intelligent, and if I can get scammed and brainwashed and gaslighted by someone, anybody can. It's very the brain is very susceptible to being conned and scammed, and when it happens, there's a lot of shame behind it, right? And a lot of anger at yourself. So that's what I'm letting go of today.
Thank you for sharing. Do you want any feedback on this, or do you just want to share it today?
I'm fine with feedback. I mean, I'm putting it out here. Ask me
Okay.
any curious question you
Yeah.
want because I think a lot of people have been scammed and not just hold it in because
Yeah.
it's embarrassing.
Super embarrassing. Super, and she should be embarrassed too, like mostly. But it sounds like she's not. But that's terrible. Like I'm sorry that you went through that. That's absolutely horrible. Um, it's really interesting to, there's this one thing that's really sticking in my mind from this share. And it's related to a couple of different things. So it happened when you were at the most vulnerable time. And you talk about that healing from your burnout took 5 to 6 years. Um, and you also kind of mentioned like it's just an emotional
Mm,
scam. I didn't give money over. But to me, it sounds like it extended your burnout. You might have gotten healthy a lot quicker. And in that way, she did steal opportunity cost from you to like build a business that you care about, build a business independently, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's small. Like I think an emotional scam might be worse than a financial scam, but maybe that's just because I'm such a softie. What
I
do you
think
like?
no, I think you're right. I think that because you can't charge someone with an emotional scam,
Hmm.
whereas she took hundreds of thousands of dollars, her and her
Right.
partner who was her fiance, like, so it wasn't just a business partner with this
Yeah.
construction company, they were romantic partners.
Yeah.
They took hundreds of thousands of dollars from people, and I'm like, oh, they didn't take any money
Hmm.
from me. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, I guess I'm guilting myself, right? Because
Of
um
course.
I there's no like legal recourse for what she did to me. There
Right.
could have been
Right.
if the business had grown quickly,
Hmm.
but I feel like there was something
Right.
inside of me that was holding back too from really putting 100% into the business
Mm.
at the time. I feel like
Hmm.
because I was so full of in my burnout stage and vulnerable, I wasn't it's really hard to be in tune with your instincts and your spidey senses when you're in a place of burnout.
Yeah.
But I think there was something like pulling me back just a little. Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, you are an intelligent person. You're very emotionally intelligent. You're very intuitive. Like, I think, like, even in being in a vulnerable state, like, you still, those skills were still there to protect you. Um, and yeah, I also think our listeners will really gravitate to the idea of being mad at yourself. And but like I feel like there shouldn't even be an ounce of anger at yourself. It should all be directed towards this other person. Because she did hurt you, and like that's not okay. Like, how would you feel if she heard this podcast?
Yeah, I've done a lot of growth because this happened again like 10 years ago, like around 2014.
Hmm.
I've done a lot of growth around it in terms of, or not growth, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying, like thinking about it. I'm fine with it.
Hmm.
I know I'm kind of
Good.
being vague about some of the details here because there
Which you
is
should
still
be.
like
Yeah.
some fear there because I actually do have fear that she could come after me and make up stories about me still because she
Hmm.
was a very powerful gaslighter.
Right.
Um, and that's what she did to many people. I mean,
Hmm.
I didn't say this in the story, but all the things she told me she had, she did
Right.
not have her yoga certification. She didn't
Hmm.
she did not have a certification to be an interior designer. She
Right.
didn't have any of those things.
Hmm.
But I there's still, because I was gaslighted so much by her, there's still fear that she's going to come after me and rip my life apart.
Oh, and again, I don't, I think you should
Yeah.
remain vague because, like, yeah, there, and that again is an intelligence thing. It's not like a fear thing. It's like, yeah, I don't think that's a protection fear based. I don't think that's a fear based protection. I think that's an intelligent based protection that you're putting on yourself with this story. Because as I was listening to it, I'm like, oh, I hope she doesn't figure out this. I mean, she's going to know anyway. Also, she's probably the type of person who is just in her own world anyway, so she probably will never hear this.
Yeah,
So,
I
you
don't
know,
she's constantly reinventing herself. So
mm-hmm.
and or I mean the other thing is there's a reason I connected to her at some point. Like maybe there is a person in
True.
there, maybe she has done some personal growth and she's stopped her ways, and I do
Mm-hmm.
hope that for her.
Yeah,
But you still need to,
that's
it
very
is
kind
very
of
kind of
you.
me. Like, so if she
Mm-hmm.
did happen to hear this, maybe she would, instead of going to that place of anger and wanting to gaslight me again or blame me, be like, yeah, I did
Mm-hmm.
that and I'm going to learn from it. But I don't know if that's possible. I don't know. But
Right.
yeah, I'm telling the story to get it out there because I think lots of people get scammed emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
financially, and in all the ways. Gaslighting is
Yeah.
very real and very, there's long term consequences on the brain. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I was healing from burnout and a whole other type of gaslighting from the company I used to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get back into like the same pattern.
Right. Right.
So while I'm healing, I get into the same pattern that's hurting me again. Right. So that's why it took like
Mm-hmm.
5, 6, 7, 8 years to heal from the burnout, because I had to heal from the original burnout. And then I had to heal from this because it was almost like a grief. I had this idea I'm going to have this business. I
Yeah.
lost the business. I ended up like
Mm-hmm.
selling my share of it to her because she was like,
Right.
either you sell me your share or we shut the business down and you can't use any of it anyways. Like, so
Hmm.
then, and I did, and I had to, everything that we had created, and a lot of it was my intellectual property. I had to start again. And right down to like a new business name, a new business logo, a new business,
Right.
like new business programs, these sorts of things. And there was a lot of fear when I was starting my Recreo, which is the business I own now on my own. It's just me.
Yeah.
Of I want to make sure that I'm not mimicking anything from the original business. And the original business was, the focus was
Mm-hmm.
corporate wellness, and my focus is
Right.
individual wellness. And I'm much happier doing that now.
Mm-hmm.
And the original business was a lot more focused on like personal training, fitness classes, types of things. And now I'm more
Right.
focused on life coaching and physical, emotional, and brain health. So there's lots of changes. I've evolved
Yeah.
a lot of ways. But yeah, when I was setting up this business, there was a lot of fear too. There's long lasting
Mm-hmm.
effects when you get scammed, when you're the victim of a con. Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds awful. Like even I'm getting like secondhand fear from you. Um, but yeah, no, again, that's really horrible. I have two more, like one's more a question about just like
Sure.
general stuff. So interestingly, we just talked about how like anger can be like all one thing or like more of like a scale kind of thing. And I'm wondering I wonder if vulnerability falls into that too. Because it's interesting to me that you could have easily become someone very cold after this experience, but I don't get that from you at all. Like here we are starting a new project. I could be a con artist. I'm not. At least I don't. Like if I am, it's all accidental. Like there's no like I have definitely been an accidental gaslighter and an accidental like shitty person, but I would never like consciously do that to somebody. And I don't understand how anyone does it. So I guess with vulnerability, like, how do you still let yourself be vulnerable?
I think there was
Like,
a time after that, which I think I've talked about before in season one, where I was really
hmm,
angry and really paranoid, and this just continued to feed that anger and paranoia. So the
right,
person that I was like 8 years ago is much different than the person that I am now. I never would
right.
have wanted to do a podcast like this, wanted to put myself out there, wanted to do
Mm,
it to help heal other people from my experiences, wanted
right.
to because I was very angry. So I guess it kind of goes with what you were saying. Like I was an angry, ragey person for a really long
Right.
time. It made me paranoid
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't help me. And
Mm-hmm.
it
That's
took a lot of
interesting.
work,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of self care, a lot of self help, because they're two different things, a lot of personal
Yes.
growth work. Um, and the way that I learned too, and yes, I have a therapist that I see once a month and probably will for the rest of my life, just as part of my process. But um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of for me, when I take courses and certifications like my life coaching stuff and that's healing for me too because I take what I learn and I'm going to do it with
Mm-hmm.
my clients, but
Right.
I'm also going to do it with myself because then I know
Yeah.
that it's easier to teach to my clients when I'm like, oh yeah, well this works because I've also done it. Like I'm life coaching
Mm-hmm.
you from knowledge, a knowledge base, a learning base, getting certifications, what I learned in school or extra courses, but I'm also coaching you from experience so that I can connect with you
Yeah.
better from a place of understanding. But I don't remember what your question was it was
Oh, like
yeah,
how?
it was
Yeah.
there were a few moments where I had aha moments where I was vulnerable with friends and it made our friendships deeper. Where I
Mm,
was like, there's
that's
more
cool.
power being honest and vulnerable in being able to um, feed connection or create connection or deepen connection. And once I had
Mm-hmm.
that kind of breakthrough aha moment in my brain, I was like, okay, this feels better. This feels lighter. It feels more authentic and more real. It's interesting. I'm just laughing to myself right now because the person that was gaslighting me and that was this person I'm talking about would always say this. Would always make you feel like you're part of the like we got this. We're in this together. We got this. And
Mm,
she would also always say we're different because we're authentic. We're our authentic self. Like the overuse the word
mm,
authentic
mm-hmm.
and overuse the term we got this babe. We got this babe. We got this.
Right.
So it made me feel
Right.
like I was part of something. And then the part of the gaslighting was being accused of not being authentic and genuine.
Mm,
When the whole time
mm-hmm.
she wasn't being authentic and genuine at all.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's funny that this word authentics come up, but you're right. I totally
Yeah.
could have gone the other way. I could have built up a wall and I did for a time, but I
Mm,
realized that that wall was holding me back from moving forward. I would never have this podcast with you. I would never
Right.
have my Recreo.health.
Hmm.
Who knows where I would be now. I would never have had the courage to say, yeah, no, this is my gift. This is my passion,
Hmm.
is helping people on a physical, emotional, and brain health level.
Yeah.
Teaching, facilitating work, all those things. Like I love it. I love it so much. It never exhausts me. But if I hadn't done the work, I wouldn't have been able to get to this point. So it took time.
Hmm.
And not just like a couple
Right.
months, like it took years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, what a journey. The last question is more just like about cliches, I guess, and it's kind of related to this still, is I feel like I keep seeing this thing around imposter syndrome, where like if you feel like an imposter, you're probably not.
I love that
What do you
saying.
think
That's
about that?
great.
Because
I
like
haven't heard it, but I love it.
this person was actually an imposter and clearly has like maybe I don't know, maybe they do have guilt, but maybe the guilt is around the fact that they got caught, not that they actually hurt people. Like I don't know this other person's journey. Um, but I know from lots of my friends, I always hear, "Oh, I'm not good enough to try that
Hmm.
out," or "I can't start a business because I don't have a degree in this thing," or "I don't have a degree in this." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't need one. Your vision is beautiful." And it's not like I'm trying to like make them like I'm not trying to make them believe in themselves because they already have the skill, but they feel like they need that piece of paper in order to
Yeah.
start a business, so then they never start
Yeah.
the business. Where like this person kind of went the
She
opposite
also
way.
like filled
Like,
that fear in me. I have the MBA.
mm,
I have the yoga
right.
certification. I have this. So that's why we would make
Mm,
good partners,
weird.
right? I'm going to teach you all about
Mm,
business because I know about business because I have an MBA,
right.
like my master's in business. But
Hmm.
I love what you're saying because imposter syndrome, it's a big thing. Like, people are talking about it a lot more now that we have these thoughts and
Yeah.
these thoughts happen. And I think you're right. I think that if you are feeling imposter, what say it again? If you're feeling imposter syndrome, it probably means you're not an imposter.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that that's great. Like everybody should write that on a post-it note and put it in their desk because
Right.
it means that you're tapping into your vulnerability,
Hmm.
and you're being like authentic to yourself. But then talk. If you talk yourself out of it, it means that you're genuine in some way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I think of every time I've started a new job, within the first like week or so, I'm like, oh, they're gonna figure it
Me
out.
too. Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
figure out that I'm not good for
Yeah.
this job. I
I
tricked
tricked
them.
them
I
in the
tricked them in
interview.
the
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah. Me
Yeah,
too. Totally.
totally. And I would tell my friends this, and I would watch the eyes roll because, oh my God, here she goes again, saying that she's not good enough for this job she just got hired for. Um, but I think it's because I'm always fearful that I'm going to be found out in this way. But like, I don't do the things this person does. So the fact that I would have that fear is irrational.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm always underselling myself. I very rarely oversell myself. Like, very rare. I don't even know if I can oversell myself. Yeah, like even I had a potential client interview last week, 2 weeks ago now, and they asked me if I knew how to use certain systems, and I told them the ones I didn't. I was like, I know how to use this one I don't, this one I don't, this one I don't. And even when they told me I wasn't the successful person, they were like, we're going with someone who knows our systems. And part of me was like, oh, I should have lied.
Hmm.
I should have lied and just figured it out on the fly and like whatever. But like,
But
no,
then
because
would
then
it be worth
I'm
all
like,
of that imposter syndrome anxiety of like, oh my God.
totally, it wouldn't be. So, like, I'm happy that I made that decision. So it is just, but then I was telling someone about that and they're like, oh, I would have lied. And I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting thing to know about you. Uh, but I think also when I was younger, I would have just lied and said, I'll figure it out on, like. But yeah, I was happier to not. I was happier to just say, nope, that's a shortcoming of mine. And if that's not going to work for you, that's fine. Like, yeah. So no, it's just really interesting because it's got me thinking about, yeah, vulnerability, imposter syndrome, and also just mad, bringing it back to my regret. I'm mad that this person did this to you, and I want to find them and I want to give them my rage. Uh, do you have anything else you want to share about either your regret or anything that has come up
No,
since?
I feel I am feeling nervous about this podcast, but I think that's okay.
Of
Like
course.
that's the point, is feeling
Yeah.
uncomfortable about stories. There was an episode I think in season one where I think it was when I was talking about my old employer and work. I was pretty nervous about it too.
Hmm.
But our experiences when we share them in vulnerable places, who knows how many people are going to listen to this podcast, but it
Yeah.
makes a difference because it helps people
Hmm.
realize that you're not alone. These things can happen. They can happen to anybody. And when we
Hmm.
share our experiences, I believe, and the reason that I'm sharing some of these experiences that I feel nervous about sharing is I'm going to learn how to not judge myself for them. And if I share the experience and people listen to it and they're saying, yeah, I've had a similar situation or that's happened to me, not only am hopefully I'm helping those listeners hearing it not judge themselves, I'm helping those listeners not judge somebody else that they may be judging when it happens too, because we do jump to judging
Right.
people like, why would you get yourself into that situation? I'm telling you, everybody, the human brain is so easily influenced. It's
Right.
so easily influenced. And we have to stop judging each other and judging ourselves when we get into these situations and stop feeling
Hmm.
shame and embarrassment around them because it could literally happen to anyone. It could
Hmm.
happen to anyone. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, what a great reminder. And since our brains are easily influenced, they can also be influenced in
That's
positive
right,
ways.
Shadow.
And in that way, would you lead us through our three healing breaths to close off
I
today's
sure would,
episode?
because the more consistent, persistent, and repetitive we are with the positive messages, can also program our brain, right? And I got consistent, persistent, repetitive from the not positive messages in my story today, and it programmed my brain, and I had to deprogram it. So now I'm programming my brain with consistent, persistent with this, with our three healing breaths. So here we go, everybody. Come onto the front edge of your seat. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor so that you feel grounded. If you're driving, please just continue to drive and listen to these three breaths later or let it go in the ear. Please, if you're doing something where you can't close your eyes and breathe, please be safe. But come onto the front edge of your seat, everybody. Put your feet flat on the floor and just let your feet sink into the floor. Acknowledge that gravity in the earth is always holding on to you and it's never going to let you fly away. And that's your feet connected to the ground. And if you want, you can put one hand on your heart and another on your belly to feel your breath. And on this first breath in, as you exhale, I choose to release pressure and expectations. On this next breath in, as you exhale, I relieve my regrets. My past does not define me. And on this last breath, as you exhale, I choose to be kind to myself moving forward. Thank you, Shadoe, for a great, safe conversation, for great feedback today, and for making me feel heard and safe in my vulnerable story today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. I also just feel so much better in general after I talk to you. But specifically, like these two things are, I wonder if rage and vulnerability are on the same coin now that I'm
Mm.
thinking more about it. But maybe I'm just trying to grasp for
No,
straws.
I think you might be right. I think you might be right.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Tune in to another episode where you can hear more regrets and more causes for applauses and more breaths for letting go. And we love you.
Thanks, listeners. Have an awesome day. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.